because we're sort of compiling a central resource for everybody. And we are going to record a majority of this because we want to add this to a sort of central site. So if there are people who maybe weren't available, or if our internet cuts out or whatever, at least we'll be able to piece something together. So do have a look in the chat. Please feel free to use the chat. Obviously, there's both of us doing this. So while Dave's talking on his bit, I will be kind of in the chat. And while I'm doing my talking, Dave will be in the chat. So please feel free to ask questions. So basically, I'll just sort of gently introduce us because I'm not, I don't know everybody that's in the group. Some of you I've never met before. So I'll introduce the two of us and, you know, who we are at Nexus, but also why we felt that this little PL slot would maybe benefit other teachers. Just to let you know, as Morag has mentioned, our internet this morning was a little patchy. When it goes off, I can jump onto my phone hotspot, but obviously that takes a little while because I have to unhook it from the Wi-Fi, you know, and then hook it up and so on. If that happens, the resource that's in that spreadsheet has got a site that Dave has built that's got like quite a lot of sort of technology things and the stuff we're going through today on it. So while you're waiting for me to reconnect us in whatever form that is, please feel free to have a look on the website that's sitting there, and then we should be sort of good to go. So basically, hello to everybody. I am Sherry Smith. I teach art at Nexus, and I would classify myself as somebody who enjoys technology, but I do also find it very challenging on occasion. I find that it's an exciting part of my subject. And as a result of that, I've had to familiarize myself with it quite rapidly. I was one of the last generations to go through university where you had to book an hour slot on the 4 computers for the entire university to write your entire dissertation. And that was sort of my year group. So I've, as a teacher in my entire career, had to spend my time sort of upskilling. And I feel that Dave sort of promotes technology in the way that I teach, and I see the way that he uses it in his subject. And even though his subject is more academic than mine, I can sort of see the use of it in my subject. And I feel that's a really important thing to say because, you know, even if somebody's talking like, this morning I saw sort of mind mapping for science, and I looked at that and thought, wow, actually we could use that in art in this way or that way. So you can adapt and change anything that we say for a particular area of working, whether it's a small group of students, large group of students, online, offline, and it may not suit you. So this is the key thing that we want to sort of drive today. We're not experts, and we're not wanting to kind of preach out a whole bunch of amazing technology and look at all these fabulous websites and so on. You must use these. Everybody is different. Everybody has different needs with regards to technology, not only as a teacher, but also as a learner. And so we're just sort of it's kind of more a show and tell. We want to show some things that we find really useful. There's nothing revolutionary, by the way, but we want to show things that we use almost daily in our teaching. And it might be things that you aren't aware of, but we also want to start the seed of technology as a wider resource in the school. So we wanted to sort of start a site to begin with and just have people add to it throughout the year. And then people can kind of, oh, I suddenly need something like this. Where do I find the info? Well, there's a technology site that has some suggestions, you know. So that's what we wanted to sort of go through. And as I said before, you know, please add to the chat as we go. One of the reasons why I've picked the things that I want to talk about in the second half today is that I did a bit of a personal review of my teaching last year online. And I recognized that the way I was teaching was maybe changing because of the technology I was having to use. And I'm now, in a weird way, not using some new flashy things that, you know, as 2020 opened and everyone was like, try this, try that, try this, try that. I sort of ended up in a bit of a whirlwind of new apps and new websites. And what I've actually recognized is, yes, some old ones have actually been updated and are working really well with Google Classroom and are almost a sort of solid go-to on a daily basis with my teaching. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And Dave, who, for everybody who doesn't know and is new, Dave, I call him Dave, everyone else seems to call him David Smith. He teaches economics and is also a Year 12 tutor. And he uses technology a lot in his classroom and for many different sort of ways, delivery and teaching, as well as encouraging his students to use it in their classes. So he'll talk to you about that in a minute. But I have noticed both of us have changed the way that we use technology in the fundamental things that we used to just take for granted in classroom, like, for example, marking work and giving it back to students. That now in my neck of the woods, the art area, it was so constant. For an hour 20, we were literally giving feedback. And now we just can't do that. And so we've had to really change how we deal with our interaction with the students. And technology has been a huge part of that. So that's basically why we're doing this afternoon. And I'll hand over to Dave, who's going to talk to you briefly about the site and then about Nearpod, and then I'll take over and carry on talking later.
All right, okay, good to see you all. Now, yeah, we're going to be looking just very quickly at the site. Now, you've got access to this through Kay's sheet, right? So very quickly, you can play with this on your own. You can have a wee look through it. There's a whole range of different aspects to it. My Nearpod talk, some animation apps in here that you can have a wee look through, okay? Some efficiency apps here, videos on the use of an iPad, and also there's a page about Google apps and various things that you can do with those as well. I'm going to be mainly focusing today about looking at Nearpod, which I've found to be fantastic. I got introduced to it a couple of years ago. Before the lockdown happened, I started using it, and then we went into, well, lockdown, and it has really helped. And it's used for note-taking, content delivery, learner revision, self-paced work, exam practice, and pretty much everything else. So I'll go through Nearpod with you, and I'll just show you how I use it, but also give you some ideas as to how it could be used, possibly for other subjects as well. So nearpod.com, you feel free to add it as an extra tab and put a link to it if you haven't seen it before. This is kind of what it looks like. This is my one, all right? You have all sorts of different things. One of the ones that's perhaps a bit interesting for a number of you will be the library that Nearpod has. So teachers will have created content already, and it will already be in Nearpod. So you could actually do a search for a particular topic that you might be teaching, and it could appear in there already done for you, and you could just take that and edit it yourself and make it your own, right? And if we have a look through here, and you'll see, these are some ones that I have done, and you'll notice I've got slightly different ones here. So I've got ones that are more introduction based, and then I've got ones that are review based. So what you do is, if you wave the cursor over the actual slides, right, I can set this so that it becomes part of a live lesson, or I can set it so it becomes student paced. And the student paced one is really good for that flipping of your lesson. So you set it so they can work on it at their own pace outside of the class, and then they can come back and answer questions, etc., based on the material that's covered. You can edit each slide that you put in there. There's preview buttons. One of the next things is the edit tool here, and this one allows you to share the work that you do in Nearpod with other teachers. So if you're in a department where there's more than one of you, you can actually share the work that you do in Nearpod with other teachers. So you don't have to recreate things every time. You can just share the work with your entire department. You can copy the work, so if you've got a standard template, you might want to copy it across, create folders like what I've done here, so it's all organized. You can also export anything that you do in Nearpod, you can export as a PDF, which a number of my learners at any rate really appreciate, because then it adds the work in a PDF format. They can download it, put it on their iPad, they can annotate over the top of it, add it to their notes and the like. It also generates reports. So these are quite cool, because you can have interactive features within your activities in Nearpod, and you can actually ask, and I'm just popping this one up, hopefully it will show me, it won't show me anything on this one because there isn't an interactive lesson. But in the interactive lessons, you will find that you can get these reports, and it will tell you how engaged the learners actually are. So for example, here's one here. So if I generate a report for this one, here it is, and it tells me, guess how many slides there are, but it should also tell me, did this morning, what level of engagement under here the students have, and it will tell me how many slides they work their way through. Sorry, yes. Tells me how many slides they work through. It will tell me what slides they've skipped. So if there is material that they've just deliberately jumped over, right? And so that's all very useful information for you, particularly when you're thinking about attitudes to learning and whether they are keeping up with the material and engaging with it. So the program in and of itself is quite straightforward. You can create here, or obviously add folders, and it will allow you to create a lesson, okay? Allow you to create videos that have built-in questions. So some of you might be familiar with other programs, other sites that do that. Well, Nearpod does that as well. Activities, individual activities, and relatively recently they've incorporated Google Slides also into the Nearpod space. And what you end up with is you end up with these, all right? And depending on your topic, you'll have a range of these activities within your Nearpod space. So I will click on edit, and I'll show you what it looks like inside. Now, what I did when I created these is I created them outside of Nearpod in Google, right? That gave me control over the content and the color scheme and the formatting, and I like doing all of those sorts of things. Then I upload them as a PDF into Nearpod, and it creates them looking like this. And you can add as many as you like. They can be as big as you like. And all you do is you either push the plus button, or you're going to go in the gap here and you're going to add new. And the things that you're able to do with Nearpod are quite astounding. So just under content, as said before, you can add videos into the actual presentation. And those videos you can get to stop and ask questions of the learners. And the video won't actually progress until they've answered the question, like some other sites enable you to do as well. And again, if you're flipping the lesson, so if you're making it student-directed, then that can be quite an effective tool as well. Adding slides. Now 3D, they also have a 3D component. Now I haven't used that, but there will be other subjects I'm sure where having 3D images will be quite a useful tool. Simulations, VR field trips, they're all in there too. And again, those are ones I haven't used, but if you're a geography class, maybe a science class, a history class, that could be quite useful potentially. Again, the videos, but specific to the BBC. More slides, slideshow in and of itself, and formatting with regards to that. You can actually add a slideshow into the activity, so it becomes a slideshow basically within a slideshow, more or less. Audios, PDFs, you can add them in as well. That's under content, but under activities, for the engagement level, you can add in things like time to climb, which is like a multiple choice race, basically. And the learners compete with each other to answer the questions, and if they answer them first, then they go higher up the mountain, and then it's the first person to get to the top, and then the quiz stops. Drag and drop exercises, open-ended questions, they're really good with both short response questions and potentially longer response questions if you're doing like exam preparation, etc. And you can actually put the answers in as well, and so the student can write the answer and then check write their answer and then check the actual answer as well. Matching pairs, good for definitions, quizzes. Flipgrid, if you're familiar with Flipgrid, they actually incorporate that into Nearpod as well. Drawing, so for my subject where there's a lot of graphs that they need to be familiar with and use in their analysis, right, you can just get a little template for access and it goes in there like a mini whiteboard for each learner. And then they can draw the diagram, whatever the diagram is. So in my case, supply and demand. And you can then evaluate each diagram, give them instant feedback as to what they might need to improve on it. So that's a very useful tool. You've got to, bear in mind some of them will be using computers like laptops, others will be using iPads. It's easier on an iPad than it is on a computer, but that's not to say you can't do it on the computer. It's just a little bit more difficult. Collaborate board. So if you're familiar with Padlet, right, that sort of notice board sort of idea, pin board sort of idea, you set them a question and then bang, 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 they put them up into the pin board, right? Put their answers up. They can add images to it, web links, all of those sorts of things, and they can work on that. Instant polls, very useful. We do that quite a lot in economics. In fact, in the humanities, we do that quite a bit. Fill in the blank exercises. For my IGCSE learners, they've found that to be quite invaluable, particularly when trying to work out how to structure answers. So you can take out certain key aspects, certain keywords, and then they have to figure out which words go where, and memory tests for definition. So there's a lot that can be included, really limited only by, how much time you have and what you're prepared to put in with regards to it. So that's Nearpod, and as I say, it's one of my favorite tools, and the ability that we have now to be able to flip it so that it is also student directed as well as live directed by the teacher, right, which is the live participation one. That works really well. And when you do live participation, okay, if I click on live participation now, what it will do is it will ask me where do I want it to present. So it might be that I want to present it through Google Classroom. Okay, here it comes up. Or I might want to just email them the link to the Nearpod, or I might want to copy the link and paste it into Google Classroom. And there's also one or two other things like having it as a Zoom meeting. So if you are a Zoomer, then you can actually do Nearpod as well through Zoom. All right, so that's a quick snapshot look at Nearpod. Now you might have questions.
Can I just interrupt? I'm just checking that I've got the answer right here. You can get started for free on it to try it out. It has like trials, doesn't it? And then if you want to, you can pay for it, correct?
Yes, what they do it's a trap, I guess, in a way, is that you can start absolutely for free, and you can upload and put all the work in, etc. to it. But the thing that will happen is that it will allow you to upload only a certain size of data. Okay, so depending how big your presentations, etc., are that you upload in, and some of them can be quite big if you're uploading videos and the like, they can be quite big, and they will allow you to get to a certain data level, and then it will stop, and it will say, in order to upload more, you need to pay for the premium service. So that premium service then gives you effectively unlimited almost space within the Nearpod framework.
Dave, I'm just going to say, this is in the chat box. We've bought, not everyone will know this yet, we've bought the new Google Workspace Education, and it's got Nearpod in it. I don't know whether it's the basic version in it or the upgraded version in it, but it's kind of in there somehow, so we'll kind of check that out. Yeah,
we will. That's sorry.
The other thing to consider is if you have one of those units or topics that's a little bit dry, or that you've been using the same resources year after year and it's a bit stale, and you kind of know it's coming and everything else is all kind of bells and whistles, and you just want to kind of dress up this one area that's always a bit slow to get going, it might be that you just use Nearpod for that one topic and just see how it goes, and then maybe see how you develop from there, because it's time intensive only at the start, and then it's basically usable again and again and again after that.
Yeah, one of our colleagues last year used it with her classes, and one of the things that she was really excited about was that she could, with the engagement activities, print out those reports and then use them as evidence for how the learner was progressing, specifically with regards to, say, key definitions or term usage or whatever the actual engagement was that she was needing them to do. And that then became something she was also able to talk to parents, etc., about. So there is a lot of functionality with it. And as I said, if you're in a department where there's more than one of you teaching a subject, it doesn't have to be one person creating all of the work. You can literally share it across everybody. And therefore, again, if it's bought, if you pay for the premium, it might be that the department is able to cover that cost as opposed to the individual.
Okay. So if anybody has any questions about Nearpod, the best time to ask is probably now while I'm waffling on and Dave is the master of the chat area. So he's going to be sort of monitoring that, and I will take over and talk about two apps that I use a lot. One of them I actually used frequently. I used it daily at school with my teaching until the beginning of the pandemic. And then I actually found that I sort of stopped using it because it wasn't so sort of instant in class. So I actually stopped using it. And then I found towards the end of last year that I was trying to manage quite a lot of information about my learners and trying to do it through Google Classroom. And although that was okay, I sort of almost wanted all the information in one place. So that's iDocio. Some people say iDoceo. And it's been around for a very long time, and it is useful for some people and not for others. But I wish when it had first started, I wish that somebody had told me about it. So I thought I would just very briefly mention it today. I'm going to start establishing this for my teaching this year. Now, I must admit, I use an iPad. In my class, a lot of the time I use it when I'm online or in the classroom, but you can also have this on your desktop as well. So it's not just there's that, toy that she uses in the art room. It's actually something, it sort of replaced my planner when I was using it. Now, the way that I'm going to do it, because I have a mirror screen, but it's very slow when I do the mirror screen. So I'm going to save that for Notability, where I actually want to kind of show you what's going on. I've done some screenshots of my old one, like I said, that I used before. And these are just to give you examples of kind of what it looks like, but also to just talk you through it. So it has changed recently. So it's had an upgrade. I need to share my screen to show you my images, which will help. So it's had an upgrade recently. So some of the more recent stuff, so I'm talking the last few months, I haven't actually checked out. But this is basically, it's a planner. You can see down the side, it's got like a summary button, a grade book button. It's got like a diary. You put your timetable in there and so on. It's got a notes section, seating plans, and pinboard. What I found I used the most was the planner, and I've just chosen a general year 9. This is from quite a few years ago, you can see. But what ended up happening was I ended up having quite a few tabs, and I would have like one tab per term. And you can open new tabs whenever you want. So you could even do one tab per unit that you teach. You can set this up how you want. So you can do numbers, you can do grades, you can do percentages, you can set it up to calculate everything for you. So I found the grade books quite easy. It also has a little pin board, which when I was starting units, I would just put my kind of go-to unit plan and some resources and information. And this is very much like Padlet, but it sits there. It's very easy to get. You just click on Pinboard and there's your info for your class that you're in. It has a notes section, and I found this really good for keeping detailed, intensive notes about the learners. So what I would do is I would have 2 or 3 sections with notes, and then on a parent evening, I would have all the work and the homework tasks and some sort of information, and I would have all the targets and stuff, and I would be able to just click on this and it would immediately show the screen and I could show the parents. So I found that quite useful in parent evenings instead of dragging sketchbooks around. It generates seating plans for you, so you can freshen up your seating plan. You just click the button and it does a new one for you. And then it does in a similar way to what Nearpod does. I haven't done any of the analytics on it because we don't really assess as regularly. But I know there are some subjects like, for example, maths or science or something where you do quite a few sort of quick formative tests, and you can choose how you want a report to be set up for that. So you can sort of say, well, I want to see, what the percentages for all the homeworks are or whatever, and pick that up. Again, really useful for parent evenings when you actually have to kind of show evidence. So that's iDossio, and I'm going to be attempting to kind of go through that this year because I've heard it's had a refresh. A lot of friends of mine in the UK have actually started using it again, having sort of sloped off from it, and they aren't iPad users. So do look into that if you're interested in some sort of organizational platform for yourself. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is notability. Now, this is where it gets complicated because I have to share my screen. So I haven't done this since May, so it's very exciting to do it now, or June it was when we stopped, wasn't it? So I'm going to share my iPad screen, hopefully, and show you notability. Now, I'll just sort of introduce a little bit about it. They have now made this available for laptops or desktops or however you want to say. And the reason I find this useful is it's basically, it's like those of you who walk around with notebooks and a diary and your laptop, and it's all that stuff all in one place. Now, it's useful for learners as well as teachers. So basically it's got a long life. It really gets used. It goes through its paces, and I really want to be able to show you the sort of key ways that I use it. So as you can see, it's got lots of different folders. So I've got stuff to do with home. I've got things that are just, inspiring for me or whatever. And I use it regularly for that. I've actually sort of almost stopped using sketchbooks, and I actually use it all the time for that. And then, you can see Nexus Work. And then each of these folders has got all my notes in it. Now, I'm going to show you an example of how I would see a learner potentially using this. So if you can imagine a learner in an IB lesson where a teacher is talking, I talk too fast, I know that. So the teacher is talking, maybe the learner is EAL or processes language a little slower. Maybe they just like to have stuff kind of recorded that they can attend to later or rehear it later. And they might want to grab stuff from the internet at the same time as somebody is talking about something. So I'm going to click on this. This is a demo that I just did earlier. You can do fancy stuff like changing the pages and all that, but I won't go into that today. You can see here, these are pictures, okay? They're just images that I have imported in there. Now, the issue I get all the time is that students don't source anything. It drives me absolutely nuts because they find a fabulous picture and then 6 months later, they don't know where they got it from. So they've got this picture, say, now here is the website source that it came from. So to me, this is really useful because they've got it. It's basically in their sketchbook. They have their image plus the website it came from. Now, how do they do that? Well, it's very easy because basically, if you turn your iPad up, and you can do this on your desktop as well. So you share your screen, say you're writing your notes, and you can either type. So you see here, you can either type notes or you handwrite them if you're using an Apple Pencil. If the teacher talks too fast, you can click on audio, and then it just records. So the teacher is yabbering away, and you can just be recording what they're saying while you're searching for the thing online. And you literally just, let me move this out the way, you literally just grab the website and you drag it in and you just pop it in, and it will save, it will reserve into there. So you obviously have to save it. I've already done it. You click save, and then it just sits there in your research. So when they're doing a knowledge harvest and they're just grabbing information really quickly in a lesson, you're talking, they have to find stuff. They can drag in there anything. So a website you've made or anything from the internet, that's a really good resource for them for using it in that way. So that's note. Another way that I use it is I use it for marking a lot. Now, the biggest issue I had with online, shifting from classroom to online, our subject is literally 90% verbal feedback. You know, we do give written feedback regularly, of course we do, but there are just little nuances, moments where we go up to them and we say, can you do this? Can you do that? We're like sitting with them as they work through stuff almost. We can't do that online. There's this real wall, this real barrier, enhanced by the fact that they actually use photos or icons and we can't even see their faces. So we've got to a point in our subject where it's almost, we have to do the verbal feedback by remote. So I'll just show you an example. This is an old example of GCSE of how I might do it. So I used to use this with GCSE when they were in the classroom. So somebody hands in their information, their boards, their artwork. This was when Izati was doing GCSE. I used to put the target on and then sort of give her some notes and some things to talk about. And you can even put the criteria at the bottom and say where she's at. So as she goes home, she's like, okay, I need to move this, put that there, change this, and this is the mark I'm looking at, okay? Same student, 2 years later. So this is just to show you how differently I worked with the same student with the same app 2 years later. So she's now IB. She's doing her comparative study. Similarly to the extended essay, you can only do one written feedback, but you can do multiple verbal feedbacks, okay? So what we would do in our lessons is I would do exactly what I'm doing with you now, but we would have a discussion about each page. I would write the notes on and we would be recording it. Then at the end of the session, I email her that. Now, if I've done too much writing, I'll delete the writing, just erase the writing because IB only lets one written. And I will email it to her. And what happens is she gets the PDF as well as the recording of the discussion. So she can follow through and it's like she's going through the discussion again. She can pause, rewind, she can listen to it. And I do the same thing when I do the written feedback. I would also send something like this. Obviously, there's less notes on it when I send the written one. But you can add to this any information. So right at the end, you can add some notes if you want. You can add the criteria here. You can link websites to it. You can link websites into the actual text. So you just do that thing I showed you earlier with the dragging and dropping. What's been magical for me and my learners is the fact that you've got this audio soundtrack, basically. I am basically leading them through their work as though I'm sitting next to them going through it. And it saves me hours of time sitting there trying to work out, how do I write this complex thought process? You know, I can actually just verbalize it and then they understand. And, you know, I just literally click the email button and off it goes. And it's the same thing in class, you know, from their point of view. They're sitting there. Let's say you have a worksheet that you're talking through. They can have that up and then they click audio and they can be writing their own notes, email it to themselves, and then just refer to that when they're doing their revision. So, you know, if you've got something that's really complicated, a really complex diagram that you're talking about, they can just sort of pocket that, put it into a folder, and then when it comes a year later and they have to suddenly revise this for their exams, they're basically just revisiting that lesson again firsthand. So that works brilliantly for me. What else? Oh, I've done the sharing screen. Folders, I mean, I've got a lot of different folders for different things. if you had a learner who was interested in using this, if you have the learners, I mean, like I get a little scatty, especially towards the end of term. And I know I have a lot of learners who are all over the shop with organizing. It's very, very easy to organize. So you just literally, you click on the button, you've either got a divider, which is like one of these big topics, or you've got a subject, which is one of the little folders that kind of goes under it. And then in each one you have this. I mean, you look, I've got 542 notes in my Notability, and believe me, I do sort through them. So, you know, I do use it regularly. It has proved so useful for feedback, particularly in the online world. You can see the difference between when I taught Izati, or worked with her a bit. I didn't actually teach her in year 11. I worked with her a bit in year 11. And then 2 years later, I was literally using it every time I was giving feedback, and it was comprehensive feedback, verbal and written. So it's very, very useful. And then you can just save that and record it. I mean, how often can you save, you know, the audio of a lesson? It's quite rare. So that's really, really useful. Dave, I don't know if there's anything else that you're thinking that I have missed out.
I've used Notability. I know I use it quite a lot myself as well. For me, it's because I'm an essay-based subject, and there are a lot of written answers that I need to go through. I handwrite with my Apple Pen because I'm looking at it through my iPad. I handwrite over the top of it, mark, you know, give them marks, put the marks in there as well, write them comments, and then I can instantly email it to them straight away, back to them. And then they've got a digital copy of it. I've got a digital copy of it, because I'm, you know, of the age when it used to be all done on pen and paper, and you had to photocopy copies of it to send it to the exam board, and you had to have a photocopy of it in your room and all of that. Well, now it's all in the iPad. Can you still use it?
To answer the question, yes, you can if you don't have an Apple Pen, because it always gives you the option. So you have 3 options actually. You can use the pen as though you were just handwriting. You can use the pen where you handwrite and it turns it into typed text, or you can just type like you normally would, either with a keyboard or on the screen. That's if you're using the iPad. As far as, because Notability, I believe, are now on desktops. So I haven't used it, but I believe that it works in much the same way. So it has the same sort of interface, and you just do typing and you know, adding things in. I think it probably will do little text box windows on a desktop, because I can't imagine you needing a pen for desktop. But I don't know. I haven't used the desktop version of it. But we will, on the site, we've put links to, Dave, actually you can do it. You can go onto the site and then show the apps, so the efficiency apps, and then just scroll down. So we've put the sort of the apps list at the top. And then if you go down, just click on it. I think that website that you just went past, yeah, just click on that and just see it. That should hopefully, fingers crossed, take you. I didn't check any of the links, which I know you should do as a teacher, so I should sort of, yeah. So it's it's Mac, iPhone, and iPad, and that's another thing, is having it on your iPhone is quite handy. You know, if you're sort of on Morag, I promise I don't do this, but if you're on duty and you quickly need to do some marking or something, you could always do it, or while you're waiting for a bus or a grab or something. You could quickly give some feedback, or, you know, quickly mark or find a website and cut and paste it, attach it to your notes. You know, it's quite useful. So I think from my point of view, this was just sort of the tip of the iceberg. And I know we're probably preaching to the converted, and I know that I've actually spoken to some of you. I know, Sam, you've used some of these in the past. And it is one of those things where I kind of felt, oh, because it's old, I don't want to use it. And then I realized that actually, you know, iDossio and Notability have had their own life while I stopped using them. And they've actually now become quite useful. And like iDossio is now integrated with Google and Google Classroom. So with iDossio, you can import grades to and from Google Classroom. So if you want to do one of those little whiz bang things, you can actually show parents from iDossio all the information from Google Classroom. And of course you can use Google Classroom. That's, you know, that's not a problem. But for some people, it doesn't work. It's too clunky. So Sam, have you got?
Yeah, sorry, Sherry, because I used Idosio for years when I first arrived at Nexus, and it's so effective for obviously kit management and everything like that to turn your iPad. Before we used to have to use the CSV files. Is that still the same, or can
no? It gives it. Yeah, that's a good point, and that's great from Engage for a one-off, isn't it? But they're a little bit like clunky. No, it gives you more options now. The other thing it gives you more options for is when you export. You used to only be able to export. I think it was Google Drive and Dropbox.
Yeah.
And maybe some other weird source that no one ever knew. And now they've kind of opened that up. And that's where this link with Google has become a little bit more robust. Okay. So you can start sort of exchanging, like moving your class list, you know, to and from used to be an absolute nightmare. But now it's actually you just go from Engage and you just move it straight into Idosio, and you can move grades and marks to and fro, Google Classroom links and so on. I haven't tried it on my laptop. I haven't tried it on my laptop. Natalie, that's a really good question about the students with the different platforms. Bearing in mind that Nexus basically is Google, all right? The way that we operate at Nexus is very much Google-based. There are shifts and changes. So, for example, IB learners with CAS and EEs and stuff, they use ManageBack and so on. But they generally will start with Google, and those who need more help or support with organization maybe would be introduced to others, and those who actually just want their own way of working will start opening up and using others. And the same for staff. You know, there are some staff who are like, I just want Google because I literally can't cope with anything else. And of course that's fair enough, and Google's very good. It's got a lot more variety now for you to choose from. But we just wanted to show the things that we were using. I wish when I'd started teaching in the more technological phase of my career, I wish somebody had said to me, hey, look at this is great. Because I would have been like, oh, hours and hours of handwriting feedback for IB kids based on a picture they handed in. It was a nightmare. And now it's like I can actually talk to them for half an hour, really valid information, plus give them notes, and then just email it to them, and they can access it at any point. You know, it's really helpful. So I think we're at the time. We've got about 3 minutes left. If anybody wants to stay on, Dave and I will stay on for 5 minutes. This is a typical sort of, if you want to stay, you can chat. If you want to stay and ask questions, by all means do. If you want to fiddle about with the website, by all means do. If you want to just forget this ever happened and get on with your jet lag or your your Google Classroom attendance and all that, then, you know, by all means do that. We'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you so much for coming along, and I hope even a little spot of this was useful for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your sharing, Sherry.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
No, that was great. Thank you both so much. That was fab. I think that verbal feedback thing is really interesting with